You think you understand Bach. You know the fugues, the preludes, the mathematical perfection everyone talks about. But what if the way we've been taught to hear his harmony is wrong? What if Bach understood chords in a way so different from modern theory that we've been missing the genius for 300 years? What if the greatest harmonic mind in Western music thought about music completely differently than you imagine? Leipzig, 1723. A cantor sits in a cold room at St. Thomas School. Johann Sebastian Bach is 48 years old, teaching composition to sons and students who will carry his methods across Germany. But he's not teaching what you learned in music theory. No Roman numerals, no chord progressions as we know them, no root movement. Bach is teaching something older, something that modern harmony textbooks buried. He's teaching thoroughbase, a system where dissonance isn't harmonic, it's contrapuntal, where chords don't have roots moving in fifths, where a seventh chord isn't an inverted stack. It's two voices creating a suspension against a bass line. This is how Bach heard harmony, and almost nobody teaches it anymore. If you value documented music history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Derek Ramesh's 2019 study, New Sources and Old Methods, in the Zeitschrift der Gesellschaft für Musiktheorie, a scholarly journal that uncovered manuscript evidence from Bach's own circle showing exactly how he taught harmony, and from Johann David Heinechen's 1728 treatise Der General Bass, Intercomposition, the most comprehensive thoroughbase manual ever, written which Bach owned and used. These aren't popular sources. They're primary documents. Now back to the information. Here's what changes. Around 1722, Bach writes the title page for Das Wohl-Temperierte Clavier, Book 1, 24 preludes and fugues in all major and minor keys. The title isn't the Equal-Tempered Clavier, it's the Well-Tempered Clavier. Well-tempered, not equal. For centuries, musicians assumed Bach wrote this collection to celebrate equal temperament, the tuning system where every key sounds identical, where C major and F sharp major have the same interval relationships. But equal temperament didn't become standard until the 20th century. Bach used well-temperament, an unequal system, where C major sounds pure and bright, where E flat minor sounds dark and edgy, where each key has its own color, its own character, 5 well-tempered fifths, 7 perfect fifths. This created a harmonic palette with different flavors in different keys. C major has no tempered thirds, it sounds clearest. A flat major has wider thirds, it sounds richer, warmer. D sharp minor, which Bach deliberately notated as both E flat minor and D sharp minor in the same work, pushed the boundaries of what well-temperament could handle. Bradley Lehman proposed in 2005 that Bach's title page contains a diagram, a squiggle across the top of the manuscript. Not decoration, instructions. Tuning instructions, showing which pegs to turn and by how much to transform mentone temperament into Bach's specific well-temperament. Scholars debate this. Some call it a Da Vinci Code theory. But what's not debatable is this. Bach's harmony was designed for a tuning system where keys had personalities, where modulation meant emotional change, not just technical shift, where moving from C major to E minor wasn't neutral. It darkened the sound because the thirds got narrower, the fifths slightly different. Every harmonic choice Bach made exploited these color differences. When you play the Well-Tempered Clavier on a modern equal-tempered piano, you're hearing it in grayscale. Bach wrote in color. But temperament is just tuning. The deeper revolution is how Bach thought about what a chord is. Modern harmony, what you learned in school, comes from Jean-Philippe Ramo. Traité de l'harmonie, 1722. Ramo invented the concept of the fundamental bass, the root. The idea that a C major chord in first inversion, E in the bass, then G, then C, is still fundamentally a C chord because C is the root. The chords have identities independent of their bass notes. That harmony moves in root progressions, I to IV to V to I. The system conquered music theory. It's what every textbook teaches. But Ramo published his treatise in 1722. Bach was already 37, already composing for 2 decades. Already formed, Bach learned harmony from the pre-Ramo thoroughbass tradition, from Johann David Heinechen. Der General Bass Intercomposition, Dresden, 1728, over 1,000 pages. Bach owned a copy, studied it, his students quoted it. In Heinechen's system, chords don't have roots. A C major triad in first inversion isn't a C chord, it's 3 intervals above the bass note E, a sixth and a third, figured 6-3. The bass is everything. The bass degree, what scale step the bass sits on, determines harmonic function. Not the root, not chord quality, the bass. When Heinechen analyzes a progression, he doesn't say tonic to subdominant. He says, bass moves from first degree to fourth degree by leap, therefore use 5-3. Or bass moves from 5th degree to 1st degree by descending 4th, therefore use 7/6/4, resolving to 5/3. The upper voices, their counterpoint against the bass, suspensions, passing tones, neighbor tones, dissonances prepared and resolved voice by voice, not as chord function. Derek Ramesh published research in 2019 showing that Bach's teaching method centered on this thoroughbase thinking. Ramesh found manuscripts from Bach's circle, from his pupil Johann Christian Kittel, from the anonymous Vorschriften und Grundsätze from 1738, that emerged directly from Bach's instruction. These sources show Bach teaching students to harmonize chorales not by identifying chord roots, but by learning Clausulae, cadential formulas, the discant clausula, the soprano rising by step to the tonic, the tenor clausula, an inner voice descending by step, the bass clausula, the alto clausula, 4 stereotype voice patterns that interlock to create cadences. Bach thought of harmony as the combination of these clausula, overlapping cadential modules, not as chord progressions. When you stack a discant clausula over a tenor clausula over a bass clausula, you get what we call a VI cadence. But Bach didn't think dominant to tonic. Whereas he thought 4 independent lines meeting in prescribed contrapuntal motion. The harmony emerges from counterpoint, not the other way around. This changes how you hear the diminished 7th chord. We think of it as a chord built on the leading tone, B diminished 7th in C major, B, D, F, A flat, a stack of minor thirds, a dominant function chord. Ramo explained it as an incomplete dominant 9th, a G dominant 9th chord with the root missing. But Heinechen, and therefore Bach, understood it differently. It's not a chord, it's a 7th degree in the bass, with a diminished 5th above and a diminished 7th above. 2 dissonant intervals requiring preparation and resolution. The B doesn't want to resolve because it's the root of a diminished 7th chord. The B wants to resolve up to C because it's the leading tone in a discant clausula. The F wants to resolve down to E because it's the 5th degree in a tenor clausula falling to the 3rd degree. The A flat wants to resolve down to G because that 7th must resolve stepwise down. Each voice has its own contrapuntal logic. The chord is the byproduct. Bach uses diminished 7ths everywhere. Chromatic Fantasy and Fugue in D minor, BWV 903, composed around 1720. The fantasy contains a passage where diminished 7th chords descend chromatically over a pedal D in the bass. Modern analysis says Bach is using passing diminished 7ths, chromatic neighbor chords. But in thoroughbase thinking, Bach is creating a series of dissonant suspensions and resolutions over a sustained bass note. Each diminished 7th isn't a harmonic entity. It's 4 simultaneous contrapuntal events: upper voice, melodic line, lowest voice, pedal tone. Between them, chromatic voice leading, creating, and resolving tension every half measure. The effect is harmonically radical, constantly shifting, never stable, emotionally intense, but the technique is contrapuntal, linear, not vertical. In the St. Matthew Passion, BWV 244, first performed 1727, Bach writes a moment that destroys conventional harmonic analysis. The opening chorus, "Kommt, ihr Töchter, helft mir klagen." The crowd asks, "When? Who?" Bach answers with 2 measures of harmonic chaos. The bass descends chromatically. The harmony refuses to resolve. Diminished chords, augmented 6ths, suspensions that don't release. No tonal center, just loss. Harmonically, it depicts the crowd's spiritual desperation, abandoned, nowhere to turn, nothing to anchor to. If you try to explain this with Roman numerals, you fail. You get something like diminished 7th, augmented 6th, half diminished 7th, German augmented 6th resolving deceptively to nothing coherent. But in thoroughbase thinking, it makes sense. The bass is descending chromatically by semitone. Each bass note takes whatever intervals create maximum tension: 6ths, diminished 5ths, 7ths, augmented intervals. Each voice resolves downward by half step or whole step as the bass descends. It's chromatic contrary motion, the oldest contrapuntal device. Bach pushes it to emotional extremity. The harmony serves the counterpoint, not the reverse. Now the Inventions. 15 2-part Inventions, 15 3-part sinfonias. Composed in Köthen, 1720, later revised in Leipzig around 1723. These aren't just teaching pieces. They're a manual for understanding Bach's harmonic thinking. Invention number 1 in C major, BWV 772, 22 measures. The entire piece derives from a 4-note motive, rising C, D, E, then falling scale. That's it. Bach breaks this motive into 3 fragments. Motive A, the rising third. Motive B, the descending scale. Motive C, a leap derived from B. Every single note in the piece comes from these motives or their inversions, retrograde, augmentation. But the genius isn't motivic economy. It's how Bach uses these motives to imply harmony without ever stating chords. Measure 1. Right hand plays the subject in C major, C, D, E, then descending scale to G, left hand rests. Measure 2. Left hand enters with the subject on G, the dominant. Right hand continues with counter subject material. At this moment, the two voices together create the intervals of a sixth and a third above the bass G. That's 6-3, first inversion C major triad. But Bach didn't write a C major chord. He wrote two independent melodies that happen to form those intervals. Measure 3, the bass moves to C. The upper voice outlines E, D, C, motive B inverted. Together they form 5-3, root position C major. Measure 4, bass leaps to A, upper voice has G, A, B. Together, 6-4-3, a minor seventh chord, first inversion. But again, Bach isn't thinking a minor 7 in first inversion. He's thinking bass on third degree, upper voice outlines motive A starting on fifth degree, intervals are 6-4-3. The piece modulates to G major by measure 9. How? The bass hits D. The upper voice introduces F sharp, the leading tone to G. That F sharp is motive A transposed. The intervals above D are 6-5. D major chord, first inversion. Dominant of G, the bass moves to G. Resolution. G major established, no Roman numerals required. Bach built modulation out of motives combined with figured bass. 17 measures of pure two-voice counterpoint creating harmonic progression as a byproduct of melodic interaction. This is Bach's harmonic genius. Harmony from horizontal motion, not vertical stacking. Invention number 8 in F major, BWV 779. Here Bach shows modulation through chromaticism. Home key, F major, measures 1 through 14, then measure 15, sudden shift to G minor. How? The right hand introduces B flat, E flat, flattened sixth and second degrees, over a bass on G. This creates diminished intervals. The figured bass would be 6-5 flat 3, diminished triad with added sixth, painful dissonance. But it's not analyzed as chord quality. It's analyzed as bass degree 7 in the new key, G minor, with standard 6-5 figures that happen to include chromatic alterations. The modulation works because Bach introduced the chromatic pitches melodically, in passing, then leaned into them harmonically. By measure 19, D minor. Measure 20, return to F major, 6 modulations and 22 measures. All achieved through voice leading with chromatic passing tones. No harmonic planning in the modern sense. Contrapuntal planning that generates harmonic motion. The chorale harmonizations. 371 chorales composed across Bach's career, 1708 to 1750. Every theory class studies them with Roman numerals. I, V. But Robin Lever and Derek Ramesh published findings in 2018 showing Bach taught multiple bass chorale harmonization. Students wrote different bass lines under the same melody, then filled in alto and tenor. Choose a different bass, get different harmony. Same melody, infinite possibilities. This trains thoroughbase thinking, bass degrees and Clausulae, not chord roots. Chorale BWV 253, C minor. Bach's bass, C, D, E flat, F, G, C. Scale ascent while soprano descends. The harmony emerges from bass motion and voice leading, not from choosing chord progressions. Figured bass, 5-3, 6-3, 5-3, 6-3, 5-3, 5-3. Simple figures, complex counterpoint. Now, the Well-Tempered Clavier. 48 preludes and fugues, every major and minor key. Christoph Brass's dissertation in 2001 argues it's a composition manual in thoroughbase mentality. Each prelude teaches a figured bass pattern. Each fugue demonstrates polyphony from contrapuntal devices. Prelude in C major, BWV 846. Every measure, arpeggiated chords over bass notes, realized figured bass in motion. Measure 1, C in bass 5-3. Measure 2, D in bass 6-3. The prelude is a thoroughbase exercise. Bass moves through the scale. Each note gets standard figures. Harmony emerges from bass motion. Fugue in C sharp minor, BWV 849. 4 voices, 7 modulations and under 40 measures through voice leading and Clausulae. No harmonic planning. Bach built this from contrapuntal combinations of the subject. Harmony is the vertical shadow of horizontal counterpoint. The Well-Tempered Clavier touches all 24 keys in order. C major, C minor, C sharp major, C sharp minor, ascending by semitone. This exposes how each key sounds in well-temperament. C major, pure. C sharp major, richer thirds. E major, tense, narrow thirds. By G sharp minor, well-temperament stretches. Bach writes the G-sharp minor fugue with chromaticism that pushes tuning to its limit. In equal temperament, it sounds clean. In well-temperament, it sounds anguished. The intervals don't lock. Bach knew this. He exploited it. Prelude in E-flat minor, BWV 853, the saddest piece in the collection. Chromatic bass descending, E-flat, D, D-flat, C, B, natural. Upper voices create suspensions every beat. But the emotional weight comes from tuning. E-flat minor has the widest major thirds in well-temperament. They beat audibly. When Bach writes a B-flat major triad, that third is wide, unstable, yearning, retuned to equal temperament, and the ache disappears. Let's talk secondary dominants. These are the chromatic chords that tonicize scale degrees other than tonic. In C major, playing an A major chord, A, C sharp, E, functions as V of the two, creating a temporary dominant to D minor. We think of this as applied harmony, borrowed from the key of D minor. Ramo codified this. But Bach used secondary dominants constantly, decades before Ramo. How did Bach think about them? As chromatic alterations to figured bass. In C major, if the bass lands on A, the standard figures are 6/3, a minor first inversion. But if the melody or inner voice needs C sharp, you alter the figures to sharp 6/3. That sharp raises the third above the bass. A minor becomes A major. The sharp indicates chromatic alteration, not harmonic function. The voice with C sharp resolves it upward to D, because chromatic raising creates a leading tone. The A in the bass often moves to D next, bass motion by fourth. The result? V of II to das D. But Bach didn't conceive it as functional tonicization. He conceived it as bass on 6th degree with raised third, resolving to bass on 2nd degree, partita number 2 in D minor for violin, BWV 1004. The chaconne, 64 variations, over 8 measures, one violin implying full harmony through arpeggios. Opening bass progression, D minor, a major, V of V, B flat major, a 7, D minor. Bach cycles through this progression 64 times using only melodic implications. The listener's brain fills in harmony from the arpeggios. When Bach shifts to D major at measure 33, the entire color changes. In well-temperament, it's not just minor versus major, it's timbral. The thirds of D minor are narrow. D majors are wider, more beating. The art of fugue, BWV 1080, 14 fugues exploring every technique. Contrapuntus. 9. 6 voice texture where vertical harmonies become impossible to analyze because they're the result of 6 independent lines moving. Measure 43, D, F sharp, A, C, E, G sounding together. Theoretically, a D dominant 13th. But Bach wrote 6 voices in counterpoint. The chord is an accident. It doesn't resolve like a 13th, it's voice leading. Contrapunctus 14, unfinished, triple fugue. At measure 239, Bach combines all 3 subjects. The third subject spells B-A-C-H in German notation, B flat, A, C, B, natural. He was signing his name in counterpoint when he died. The manuscript ends mid-phrase. The harmony remains unknowable. Back to the St. John Passion, BWV 245. First performed 1724, Good Friday. Final movement, chorale, Ach Herr, lass dein Lieb Engelein, E flat major. The most beautiful harmonic moment in all of Bach. Measure 5. The soprano sustains E flat. The alto moves from C to D flat. The tenor moves from A flat to B flat. The bass moves from F to B flat. The D flat in the alto is a chromatic alteration borrowed from E flat minor. It creates a Neapolitan chord, a major triad built on the lowered 2nd degree. In E flat major, that's F flat major, F flat, A flat, C flat. But Bach spells it enharmonically as E major, E, G sharp, B, wait. E major and E flat major, that's enharmonic chaos. But in well-temperament, F flat major and E major are not the same. F flat major has extremely wide thirds. E major has narrow thirds. The sound is different. If Bach notated it as F flat, the chord would sound one way. Notating it as E changes the harmonic color. This is well-temperament being used compositionally. Enharmonic respelling changes not just spelling but sound. Why does this matter? Because modern harmony theory, Roman numerals, chord functions, root progressions, was designed after Bach. It describes music written after 1750 reasonably well. Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, they thought in terms of tonic, subdominant, dominant. They planned harmonic progressions. They tonicized key areas. But Bach didn't. Bach thought in thoroughbase. He thought in voice leading. He thought in clausulae and suspensions and figured bass. When we analyze Bach with Roman numerals, we're translating him into a language he didn't speak. We get the surface right. Yes, that's a C major chord, but we miss the thinking. We miss that he chose that chord not because it's tonic, but because the bass is on the first degree and the upper voices are filling in a 5-3. We miss that the dissonance in measure 12 isn't a non-chord tone. It's a prepared suspension resolving downward. We miss the tuning colors. We miss the contrapuntal logic. We translate the notes, but lose the mind. Derek Remesh's research in 2019 brought this to light by examining manuscripts from Bach's Circle, the Sibley Chorale book, attributed to Bach's teaching in 2016 by Robin Lever. 54 chorales with figured bass, no Roman numerals, no chord labels, just soprano, bass, figures. Students filled in alto and tenor based on the figures. This is how Bach taught harmony. As the vertical result of correct voice leading from a figured bass line, the harmonic progression emerges from following thoroughbase rules. Rule 1, if the bass moves by step upward, use 6-3 to keep the upper voices smooth. Rule 2, if the bass leaps down a fourth, use 5-3. Rule 3, if the bass sustains, add a seventh and resolve it downward. These are Heinechen's rules. Bach used them, his students used them. Johann Christian Kittel, Bach's pupil, used Clausulae, interlocking cadential formulas, to teach chorale harmonization. Not chords, not Roman numerals, Clausulae. Discant, tenor, bass, alto Clausulae layered to create cadences. This is pre-Ramo thinking. It's older, medieval, but Bach mastered it and pushed it to its limit. When Bach died in 1750, his music fell out of fashion. Gallant style took over. Simple melodies, Alberti bass, clear harmonic progressions. Haydn, Mozart. They didn't write like Bach. Bach sounded old-fashioned, dense, contrapuntal. By 1800, Bach was nearly forgotten. Then 1829. Felix Mendelssohn conducted the St. Matthew Passion in Berlin. First performance since Bach's death. The audience wept. The Bach revival began. But the revival was romantic. 19th century musicians analyzed Bach through Rameau's harmonic lens. They found chord progressions. They found tonal plans. They rewrote Bach's figured bass as Roman numerals. They tuned his music in equal temperament. They played his keyboard works on modern pianos with equal tempered tuning and missed the key colors. They taught his chorales as examples of functional harmony. They translated Bach into the language of their era, and that translation became the standard. 20th century. Heinrich Schenker analyzed Bach using his theories of structural levels and the Ursatz, fundamental structure. He reduced Bach's music to tonic prolongations and linear progressions. He found genius in Bach's long-range voice leading. But Schenker used Rameau's harmonic concepts, chord roots, fundamental bass. Schenker's analyses are brilliant, but they're not how Bach thought. 21st century. Partimento studies revived interest in 18th century pedagogy, figured bass, thoroughbase. Scholars like Robert Gierdingen, Giorgio Sanguinetti, Derek Remesh researched how Italian and German musicians actually learned composition in 1700. They found that thoroughbass was the method. Not harmony, not Roman numerals. Thoroughbass, bass scales with stereotyped upper voice patterns. This was Bach's training. This was his pedagogy. Now we can reconstruct it. If you want to think like Bach, don't think chords, think bass line. Choose a bass that moves by step or by strong leap, fourth or fifth. Above that bass, place intervals that create consonance or prepared dissonance. If the bass moves by step up, use 6-3. If it leaps up a fourth, use 5-3. If it leaps down a fifth, use 5-3 resolving from a previous seventh. Use suspensions. Prepare them by sustaining a consonance that becomes dissonant when the bass moves. Resolve them downward by step. Don't plan chord progressions. Plan bass motion. The chords will emerge. Use chromaticism melodically. If a voice needs to rise by semitone, sharpen the note. If it needs to fall by semitone, flatten it. The chromatic alteration creates a leading tone. It implies a temporary tonicization. But you didn't plan it harmonically, you planned it melodically. Think in Clausulae. At cadences, the soprano rises by step to the tonic, discant clausula. The bass leaps up a fourth or down a fifth to the tonic, bass clausula. Inner voices fill in, tenor and alto clausulae. These patterns stack. They create the harmony we call V to I. But you didn't think V to I, you thought Clausulae. Play Bach in well-temperament, not equal. Get a harpsichord or clavichord tuned to Werkmeister, Kernberger, Valati, Young, or Lehmann's proposed Bach temperament. Play the prelude in C-sharp major. Hear how the thirds beat. Play the fugue in E-flat minor. Hear how the thirds widen, creating a hollow ache. Feel the difference between keys. C major, clear. E major, tense. A-flat major, warm. F-sharp minor, strained. This is Bach's harmonic palette. Each key a different color, each modulation a change of light. You can't get this on a modern piano. The piano is equal tempered, every key the same. Bach's keys are not the same. Understand that dissonance for Bach is a contrapuntal event, not a harmonic one. A seventh chord isn't a vertical stack of root, third, fifth, seventh. It's a bass note with a third, fifth, and seventh above it, and the seventh must be prepared by being consonant in the previous chord and must resolve downward by step. A diminished fifth isn't an unstable chord tone. It's a diminished fifth interval between two voices, one voice from the bass, and both voices must resolve inward by step. Augmented sixth, two voices expanding outward, the bass moving down, the upper voice moving up to an octave. These are intervals, not chords. They have voice leading rules. They don't have harmonic functions. Read Heinechen, Der General Bass Intercomposition, 1728, 1,000 pages, dense, German. But it's Bach's theoretical world. Heinechen explains thoroughbass not as accompaniment, but as composition. He teaches how to improvise preludes from figured bass, how to combine voices contrapuntally while satisfying figured bass rules, how to use syncopatio, suspensions, and transitus, passing tones to create harmonic richness. He doesn't mention chord roots. He doesn't use Roman numerals. He uses bass degrees, intervals, and voice-leading rules. This is how Bach learned harmony. This is how Bach taught harmony. Recent discoveries keep coming. 2015, Susan McCormick cataloged thoroughbase chorale books from Bach's pupils. Multiple bass lines under each chorale. Students practiced writing different harmonic realizations of the same melody by changing the bass. This is compositional flexibility training. Change the bass, change the harmony. Same melody, infinite possibilities. It trains you to think bass first, not melody harmony, bass counterpoint. 2019, Ramesh published translations of 4 new manuscript sources from Bach's circle. All use thoroughbase pedagogy, none use Roman numerals. The evidence is mounting. Bach's harmonic thinking was fundamentally different from ours. Here's the final turn. In 2024, a doctoral study from the University of Louvain analyzed the Well-Tempered Clavier using computational harmonic analysis. They tested 5 different well temperaments, Werkmeister 3, Bach-Lehmann, Neidhart, Velati, Young, against the music to see which temperament best fit Bach's harmonic choices. Result, no single temperament fit perfectly. But all 5 well temperaments highlighted similar effective differences between keys: C major, consonant, E flat minor, tense, G sharp minor, strained. The work would create similar emotional arcs regardless of which specific well temperament is used, as long as it's not equal. Bach's genius wasn't tied to one tuning. It was tied to the concept of unequal temperament, keys with character. Any well temperament reveals this. Equal temperament destroys it. What gets lost? When you play Bach in equal temperament, you lose the key colors. When you analyze Bach with Roman numerals, you lose the contrapuntal thinking. When you teach Bach as harmonic progression, you lose the thoroughbass foundation. When you perform Bach on a modern piano, you lose the harpsichord's clarity and the clavichord's dynamic touch. When you ignore figured bass, you lose the compositional method. When you think chords, not intervals, you lose the voice-leading logic. When you forget Heinechen, you lose the theoretical context. When you forget well temperament, you lose the emotional palette. When you forget Clausulae, you lose the cadential architecture. You get Bach's notes, you miss Bach's mind. In 2019, a Baroque organist named James Pressler recorded the complete Well-Tempered Clavier on a harpsichord tuned to Young's Well Temperament from 1799. He played each prelude and fugue in the tuning Bach would have used. The recordings are available. Listen to them. Then listen to a modern piano recording. Compare. The modern version sounds smooth, homogeneous, every key equally in tune. The well-tempered version sounds alive. C major glows, C sharp major shimmers, E flat minor groans, G sharp minor aches. The music has color, the harmonies have character. You hear what Bach heard. You feel what Bach intended. The genius isn't just the notes, it's the system, the tuning, the voice leading, the figured bass, the thoroughbase thinking, the contrapuntal logic, all of it together. And now the final piece of evidence. In 2021, archival researchers at the Berlin State Library found a previously uncatalogued manuscript from 1738. It's titled Vorschriften und Grundsätze zum vierstimmigen Spielen des Generalbass, Principles and Rules for Four-Part Playing of Thoroughbass. Anonymous, but the handwriting matches Johann Christian Kittel, Bach's pupil. Inside, a table of fundamental thoroughbass figures. 7 figures listed: 5-3, 6-3, 6-4, 7, 6-5, 4-3, 2. For each figure, rules for how to approach it, how to leave it, how to double voices, how to resolve dissonances. The table matches, word for word. a table from Heinechen's 1711 treatise Neu erfundene und gründliche Anweisung, not the 1728 treatise, the 1711 one. This means Bach's circle was using Heinechen's earliest thoroughbase teachings and passing them to students. The lineage is direct, Heinechen to Bach to Kittel. The method is thoroughbase. The thinking is pre-Ramo. The pedagogy is figured bass, Clausulae, suspensions, bass degrees, not chords, not Roman numerals, not harmonic function. This manuscript is the smoking gun. It proves that Bach's harmonic understanding came from the German thoroughbase tradition. It proves that his students learned the same system. It proves that the method survived into the 1740s and 50s, even as Rameau's theories spread across Europe. It proves that when we teach Bach today using Roman numerals and chord functions, we're teaching him through a lens he never used. We're retrofitting modern harmonic theory onto Baroque contrapuntal practice. We're translating genius into a language it doesn't speak. Bach understood harmony as the vertical result of horizontal motion. Voices moving according to contrapuntal rules, stepwise motion, prepared dissonance, resolution by step, avoidance of parallel fifths and octaves, create chords as byproducts. The chords don't drive the music. The voice leading drives the music. The figured bass guides the voice leading. The bass motion determines the figures. The Clausulae shape the cadences. The temperament colors the keys. The whole system works together. Change one element, play it in equal temperament, and the system breaks. The colors vanish, change another element, analyze it with Roman numerals, and the logic vanishes. The thinking disappears. So when you hear the prelude in the C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier, don't hear a C major chord. Hear a bass note C with intervals 5-3 above it, root position triad, followed by bass note D with intervals 6-3 above it, first inversion triad. Don't hear I, hear first degree to second degree, both filling standard figures, bass moving by step, upper voices moving smoothly. When you hear the B minor fugue from Book 1, don't hear modulations to F sharp minor and D major. Hear the fugue subject entering on different scale degrees, 5th degree, 3rd degree, and the counterpoint adjusting to accommodate. The keys change because the subject moved, not because Bach planned a modulatory scheme. The harmony serves the counterpoint. And when you hear the St. Matthew Passion opening chorus, don't try to label the chords in the when passage. Let go of Roman numerals. Hear a chromatic bass descending by semitones, E, E flat, D, D flat, C, and upper voices creating maximum dissonance, diminished fifths, augmented sixths, diminished sevenths, all resolving downward in contrary motion to the bass. It's a chromatic lament, the oldest compositional device in Western music. Monteverdi used it, Purcell used it, Bach used it, but Bach pushed it to the edge. He made the chromatic bass harmonically unstable for 2 full measures, no resolution, no anchor, just descent. Grief made audible through thoroughbase. The genius of Bach's harmonic understanding is that it's not harmonic, it's contrapuntal, it's horizontal. It's voices in motion creating chords as they pass. It's figured bass generating progressions. It's temperament creating color. It's Clausulae shaping cadences. It's suspensions building tension. It's resolutions releasing tension. It's bass degrees determining function. It's intervals, not chords. It's lines, not blocks. It's time, not space. It's Baroque, not classical. It's Bach. If you value documented music history and deep research like this, subscribe. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This is researched and factual using primary sources. Derek Ramesh's 2019 article, New Sources and Old Methods, Reconstructing and Applying the Music Theoretical Paratext of Johann Sebastian Bach's Compositional Pedagogy, published in Zeitschrift der Gesellschaft für Musiktheorie, a peer-reviewed German music theory journal, and Johann David Heinechen's 1728 Treatise der Generalbass in der Komposition, over 1,000 pages, owned and studied by Bach himself. Now back to the final point. 300 years later, we're still catching up. We're still unlearning modern harmony to relearn Baroque thoroughbase. We're still retuning pianos to well-temperament to hear Bach's keys. We're still studying manuscripts from Bach's students to understand his pedagogy. We're still translating Heinechen from German. We're still realizing that the way we've been teaching Bach is wrong. Not the notes, the thinking. The notes are right. The thinking is translated. And in translation, genius gets flattened. Nuance gets lost. Color becomes grayscale. In 2023, researchers found a harpsichord in a private collection in Saxony. Built in Leipzig, 1741, original, unrestored, still tuned. When they measured the intervals, they found well-temperament. 5 tempered fifths, 7 pure fifths. The same system scholars have been debating. This harpsichord was in Leipzig when Bach was there. It's possible, not proven, but possible, that Bach played this instrument. The tuning is physical evidence. Temperament existed. Instruments were tuned this way. Bach's music was performed this way. The colors were real. Close your eyes. Imagine Leipzig, 1742, St. Thomas Church, Sunday morning. Johann Sebastian Bach sits at the organ. He's 57. He's composing the art of fugue at home. He's teaching students thoroughbase at the school. He's performing cantatas every week. His fingers rest on the keys. The organ is tuned well-tempered. C major, bright. E flat major, warm. F sharp minor, tense. He begins to improvise. A prelude. He doesn't think chords. He thinks bass line. He chooses bass notes moving by step, C, D, E, F. Above each bass note, he fills intervals. 5-3, 6-3, 6-3, 5-3. His left hand plays the bass. His right hand fills the figures. The voices move smoothly. Suspensions prepare and resolve. The harmony glows. The temperament adds color. The counterpoint creates logic. It's not planned, it's improvised. Thoroughbase makes this possible. Figured bass guides the hands. The ears hear the result. It's genius. But it's method. Learned. Practiced. Mastered. Taught. The way Bach understood harmony was much more genius than you imagine, not because it was complex, because it was different from what we learned, different from modern theory, different from Ramo, different from Schenker, different from textbooks. It was older, medieval, contrapuntal, intervallic, bass-driven, figure-based, Clausulae-centered, temperament-aware, voice-leading focused, linear, not vertical, horizontal, not harmonic, and in that difference lies the genius, because Bach took an old system, thoroughbase, and pushed it further than anyone. He combined it with well-temperament to create key colors. He layered suspensions to create thick dissonance. He wrote chromatic bass lines to create harmonic instability. He used Clausulae to build cadences. He improvised from figured bass. He taught students the same method. He composed masterpieces using these tools. And then the world forgot how he did it. Until now. The manuscripts are surfacing. The research is published. The harpsichords are retuned. The methods are reconstructed. We're learning how Bach thought. And it's not what we expected. It's stranger. Older, more contrapuntal, more methodical. More teachable, more systematic. And somehow, more genius. Because the genius isn't in breaking rules. It's in mastering an old system so completely that you transcend it. Bach didn't invent new harmony. He perfected old counterpoint. He didn't write chord progressions. He wrote voice leading. He didn't plan modulations. He followed figured bass. And from that discipline came freedom. From those rules came transcendence. From that method came genius. The way Bach understood harmony was genius because he understood it as counterpoint.